A 1.0 call to order, announcement of appeals process, Metropolitan Code of Laws 2.68.030. If you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Traffic and Parking Commission, you may appeal the decision by filing a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancellor or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of entry of the Commission's decision. We advise that you seek your own independent legal advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that procedural requirements have been met. Per the Tennessee Open Meetings Act, Public Chapter number 300, members of the public are invited to provide comments on matters germane to the items on the agenda. With that, 2.0 will now ask for approval of last month's agenda, or approval of this month's agenda.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
It's been first and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is passed. Item 3.0 will ask for approval of last month's meeting minutes from January 8th, 2024.
Move to approve.
I second.
It has been first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It has been passed. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to provide any public comment on anything related to the Traffic and Parking Commission that is not, that you're not asked to speak on a specific item on the agenda? Okay. If not, we'll move on to item 5.0. Approval of the consent agenda. So item 5.1, CD 19 mandatory referral, a request to abandon a portion of the right-of-way and public utility easements on Russell Street between Interstate Drive and South First Street, and on South Second Street between Woodland Street and Victory Avenue. It's requested by Reagan Smith and Associates. Just a clarification, I do 5.1 and 5.2, and then we'll vote on them all together, correct?
So you can ask if anyone wants to remove any items from the consent agenda before you read them out.
Okay. So does anybody?
If nobody does, then you vote on them all together, yes.
Okay. Would anybody like to remove any items on the consent agenda before I move on? Okay. So 5.2, NDOT collector and local street speed reduction Vision Zero initiative. You have them listed here on your screen. I'll just briefly run through. The first one's Anderson Road, from Priest Lake Drive to Couchville Parkway, I believe. The reduction is down to 30 miles per hour. Then Buena Vista from Hummingbird to Mormons, Arm Road. The reduction is 35 miles per hour. Broadmoor Drive from Gallatin to Lamont Drive. The reduction is to 35 miles per hour. Cahal Avenue from Gallatin Avenue to Porter Avenue, down to 30 miles per hour. Davidson Street from South 5th Street to South 14th Street. The reduction is to 30 miles per hour. Paragon Mills Road from Nolensville Pike to Eisenhower Drive is down to 30 miles per hour. Robertson Avenue from Annex Avenue to Morrow Road is down to 30 miles per hour. South 11th Street from Woodland Street to Shelby Avenue, reduction to 25 miles per hour. Smith Springs Road from Phil Hall Parkway to its eastern is down to 30 miles per hour. And then Thompson from Patricia Drive to Good Bar Drive is down to 30 miles per hour. Staff, do you have any comments on any of these before we vote?
This initiative is part of a program. We looked at 30 streets that were streets that we would consider for traffic calming, but would be ineligible for vertical measures like speed cushions or traffic tables. So we looked at what are some other traffic calming measures that we could do to reduce crashes on these streets. And we used the criteria that were set up in the National Cooperative Highway Research Program Report 966 to evaluate these streets. And we, from the initial set of 30, we condensed it down to 12. And then among the 12, 2 of those were kind of a combination. So we wound up with a total of 10 to recommend to you today.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, we have any comments or questions on any of these items?
One street is going to 25. Several of the other ones are all just going to 30 or 35.
That's correct. It's South 11th is recommended to go down to 25, and that's based on the analysis that we've done. And that's also consistent with some of the adjacent streets there in East Nashville as well. As we speak, South 11th is a little bit of an outlier, as many of the adjacent streets have already had their posted speed limits changed, but South 11th was not eligible with that change that we did earlier.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
It has been first and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is passed. We'll move on to the regular agenda. Item 6.1, authorization for new residential permit parking from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week on Dallas Avenue between 12th Avenue South and Belmont Boulevard, requested by Councilmember Cash. Staff, would you please provide comment on this item?
Good afternoon. My name is Emmanuel Matias. I'm with NDOT CURB. So analysis have been done for this area, and the petition has the support of the District 19 Councilmember Tom Cash. The proposed RPP meets the criteria of 4 out of 8, 1 partially and 3 in full. I also wanted to note one of the notes that analysis yields the problem of commercial traffic encroaching into residential neighborhoods is amplified by increasingly intensive 12 South development without the requisite parking requirements to support the development. There are existing residential parking areas that on the other side of the 12th Avenue South, Carruthers Avenue, and Halcyon Avenue, directly across from Dallas Avenue. Expansion of RPP along the residential corridors poses a substantial risk that the commercial sites on 12th Avenue South will eventually find themselves without sustainable parking for the businesses to thrive. Outside of that, the RPP is legitimate in the sense that it has passed the criteria for which it would have to be approved for. So.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Question. With this whole rollout that we're doing of the smart parking initiative, permit parking is supposed to be, maybe becomes one component of that. What's the enforcement mechanism on this? Because historically, we've had a lot of requests for permit parking in and around the 12th South area because of the commercial, and implementing RPP has been a challenge due to enforcement. And then I just have a concern about, is there a long-term plan for more? Because are we just going to shift the problem from one street to another street?
So that's a very good question. So in sense of the enforcement, it is part of NDOT's routine to enforce RPP-related areas. And as far as expanding, we actually are looking into and are in the beginning phases of talking to the council members to emphasize the RPP enforcement, in that we wanted to present what the costs are for us to be able to enforce on a weekly, daily basis, to kind of outline what is it that we're doing now and what is our plan into the future to where it would increase and be a little more aggressive, because we do want compliance, and the only way to do that if we revisit the RPP areas more than we do now. So there's an ongoing communication pertaining to that, and I'm sure that we'll come to a conclusion that will help to where RPPs are enforced a little more than they are now.
Is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak to this item? Is it a councilman? Thank you, Councilman. Yeah.
Thanks, and Chairman Green, I appreciate what you said about enforcement. It has
the
been a
chair.
concern.
He's the chair now.
I'm sorry.
Councilman Castro.
I apologize.
If you don't, no problem. While we're doing this transfer, if you don't mind to state your name for the record,
I'm
and then,
Tom Cash, Councilman for District 18.
great.
Commissioner Green, I appreciate what you said about enforcement, because it has been a concern. I know, the folks on Dallas wanted some relief from the daily, hourly onslaught of parking on their street, and it's caused problems. And I remember as we were looking at the smart parking legislation, every step of the way, I asked Director Alarcon, are we going to get better enforcement for residential permit parking? And every time I was assured that this would add enforcement and it would also free up staff enforcement. And that is one of the main reasons that I supported the smart parking plan, is that I was promised that there would be more enforcement. So we need to do better. I think there's been some improvement, but I still think there is a good amount of room for improvement on that. Folks are opting into this program. They're paying, it's not huge, but paying a little bit of money, and they need to know, they need better reassurances and actions that the enforcement will be there, that will make a difference, and it won't just be signs scaring people off, but actual consequences when they violate what's in those signs. I do have some neighbors here from Dallas. I think as we were going through the process, a lot of questions came up, and they may have a question. I know there's a question about how the guest parking works, because I think there might have been a change recently in how that works. My understanding is that there are, a resident can get 2 guest parking passes that are kind of good, that they can have somebody put on the dash. And then in addition to that, they can get 3 kind of temporary, like if somebody's coming in from out of town and they need extra, is my understanding. But if there's anybody here that can help us understand the guest pass program a little bit as part of the RPP.
So we need clarity on the number of guest passes or the procedure on how to get them, or both?
And who are they good for? As far as, my name's Ian Hortert. I'm a resident on Dallas Avenue, and one of our questions is how the guest passes work. And at some point we were told that we actually had to register a car and the name of a car for our guests, and that's more of a tenant than a guest. So I'd like some clarification on that.
So just briefly, I don't know how much time we have to spend on this, but there's 3 types of RPPs, RPP-related permits. One of them is specifically for you as a resident,
Yeah.
so that ties to your license plate and your address. That would be an annual fee for that. We would issue a permit. You would have the same process we just went through now occurs. Then there is a visitor's permit, which would be for somebody who's visiting you for short term. And I believe that's it. So the fee for the visitors is $5. Currently, the rate for your permit as a RPP holder is $10.
And do we have to register their car?
Yes. So because this is tied to a license plate, and it's enforced per license plate, it has to be tied to that. Otherwise, anybody could just come and use your RPP area.
So one of the issues that I'm the one who headed up getting signatures on our street that my neighbors had is, what happens if they have a dinner party? What happens if they're having a graduation party? These are different people who are coming to visit our homes that we're not going to register their license plates. I understand that you're using a license plate recognition, but it doesn't allow us to live like we have lived. I've lived on Dallas since 1998, so the flipping of the minimum parking in this past year has really altered our lives. And me and my neighbors are really upset by this. So I need to go back with some answers. And just saying enforcement's going to get better I'm not going to leave today with that as an answer. I want to know what it is we're doing and how are we dealing with guest parking? And how we can deal with what happens if we're having a get-together. And that's something that we should be allowed to do without having, what happens if it is a graduation party, we have 10 or 15 guests?
No.
What happens then?
Absolutely. We could just take a second and let legal or Mr.
Yeah,
Freeze.
we're going to read and reference what's in the code as far as the program. There are some allowances associated with that we want to address.
Okay, it says, in addition to 2 annual visitor permits, residents within the residential permit parking area may also purchase up to 3 short-term visitor parking passes, which shall be valid for 14 days and shall be renewable but not transferable. The application shall identify the guest, the address that the guest will be visiting, as well as the guest vehicle make, model, and license plate number. The application shall also show the name and address of the host and shall be signed by the host.
But again, we need a specific license plate.
Mm-hmm.
So, and how often can we obtain those and at what cost?
The permit fees are individual for each of them, for however many you end up getting. But 2 of them can be annual, like if you have a visitor that comes to see you on a regular basis and you just want them to be able to, park there, no fuss, no foul, then you can have an annual permit. And then if you are having like a party or something like that, then you can do the 3 2-week permit parking.
So it does give us some allowance, but not for a casual get-together, someone's having a pool party.
You'd have to plan ahead a little bit, yes.
Yeah. Are there any allowances for that to change?
That is in the Metro Code, so that would require council ordinance to change.
So I want to make sure I understand everything, because I feel like I got a contradiction when I was asking about this in the email chain with some great NDOT people. Everything is done by license plate, because I got the sense in the email discussion, that the first 2 visitor passes were dash placed.
I was just reading out loud exactly.
What I'm asking is, I'm really asking about not what's written in the law, but what the practice currently is.
So the practice would provide dashboard passes that you would have on the vehicle. So regardless of a license plate or not, which is required, but you would have.
2 would go in,
Correct.
would be given, and they go in the dash.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, currently, right now, everything's tied to the license plate. You'll be issued a dash permit, how it currently has been. And in the future, we will look to have everything tied and looped into what we call either a white list or a residential parking program, kind of like bucket in our technology. But for right now, everything will be tied to kind of your dash pass, have it present and then have it visible for the enforcement officers to see.
And so those 2 can be used throughout the year, not necessarily for the same 2 people parking. They have to be used by the resident they're given to. But, if I come by in February for a Valentine's party, but then somebody else comes for Easter, I can use it once and then somebody else can use it another time, right? Is that correct?
But they're not interchangeable.
I mean, it sounds like maybe the 2 annual ones somewhat are. I was reading the language for the 3 short-term ones.
Yeah, it sounds like the first 2,
It does say annual visitors passes shall not be transferable, but it also says that the application for the annual visitor permits shall identify the resident's name, address, and unit number. I'm wondering if that transferable language and if applicable, and shall be signed a unique identification number, where it says annual visitor passes may not be transferable. I wonder if that means if the person sells their
Transferable
home.
between the residents.
yes. Yes, I can't give my next door neighbor theirs.
I think that's what the intent is.
But it is transferable for the can go in anybody's dashes.
It needs only the residents.
Right.
Sorry, it needs only the resident's name, so it sounds like as long as you have the resident's name and that unique identifying number, and the resident's address and so forth, then it would work for anybody.
And how many of those do we get?
2.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And just,
So I will go back. Commissioners, my name is Brad Freeze. I'm the Deputy Director of the Nashville DOT. So we'll go back to your comment earlier about enforcement. We are, I know that it may sound like a broken record. Councilmember Cash, we have talked about enforcement for quite some time. We have actually made some positive steps here in the recent past as far as hiring on staff more enforcement officers. Actually, we're transitioning from LAS employees to in-staff NDOT employees who actually be out in the field, driving the vehicles, doing the enforcement. You will see an improvement as far as the number of ticketing that actually is taking place out in the field. So that I can assure you that will improve.
does that out in the field include cars that are parked in bike lanes?
It does, yes.
The same enforcement officers will
Bike
go after
lanes,
both kinds?
They will cover that, yes. They cover those enforcement as well as just standard parking enforcement, residential permit. They're all cross-trained to do all that together as one program.
Great, I get lots of complaints about the pictures of bike lanes that are just like covered in cars.
We do as well, so yes.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that. I think it really, for this to work, for people to have faith in the system.
Absolutely.
It's got to have enforcement. Thank you.
I agree, 100%. Thank you.
I would like to invite persons who identify a vehicle that's illegally parked in a bike lane to use Hub Nashville or contact 311 and, make a report of a vehicle that's parked illegally, and that will be dispatched to our enforcement team.
Yeah, those.
I've done some of that.
So 311 is it is staffed around the clock. So don't feel like that's you're just putting it away and it's going to be lost. Those are directly dispatched. They knew who to contact down, and those tickets go in directly to our enforcement team. So
That's something. Yeah. But it's not the same as a map of going around to all the places that need enforcement.
Yes, they do their typical. Yes, they do their typical rounds and their scheduled routes. But yes, they do address those calls as well that come into 311.
Thanks.
I just want to ask a clarifying question real quick. Just mindful, having sat in a lot of neighborhood meetings about streets off 12th and decisions people have made and why, knowing that it's this guest parking that is often sort of the sticking point in getting permit parking. You mentioned that we're moving away from the dash placards and moving toward license plates for all of these. When is that transition happening?
We don't have a scheduled date yet for that change. We are deeply in a process to where we have LPR system set up. The back end of it is set up. We have them on the vehicles, but the system is not live yet. So once the system is live, it will give us the possibility to create a list that would include, whitelist, RPP, government vehicles, anything that is tied to a license plate that would possibly, not require a dash pass.
And so when that happens, the dash passes that can be shared. That is a really tricky sentence to say. You can't use those anymore. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if there's a consensus on that. We can always, because the system is not fully developed yet in a sense that it's not live, I think there's still some adjustment that can be made. So this is something that we can revisit and see, even if it's a trial and error, see if it works with, see what it does without, and then conclude which option actually works better in real life.
So
I think there's
I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we are flexible in adjusting to the needs of whatever is needed to make it so the RPPs are successful.
Councilmember, we'll have to go back before you, since that is in Metro Code. We would have to have an ordinance to actually change how that system actually operates. So no, the parking passes The placards will still be in effect until we actually modernize the code. And you'll see that come before traffic and parking and then through council.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure that we don't say something and then tomorrow it changes.
Thank you.
Can we get some context around what's on the map that's on the screen? Is this related to this item?
Says it's just.
These
I don't
are,
know what that is.
this seems to be a list of the RPPs.
This is just
a
an
list of-
overview of the current RPP program.
I think that's north of my district.
Yeah, could you go down to, this is District 18?
So we are preparing a lot of GIS maps based on the parking program, and we want to be able to provide this online and to the commissioners as well to show you, give you an overview. This is just an example of a recent map that we have put together to show you where the existing programs are.
That's
everything
quite a
is-
jump in numbers.
Everything in green is current?
That's correct.
So the 114, that's the individual properties or people?
That is correct.
Okay.
Those are the individual participants in the properties, correct?
Thank you.
May I ask another question, Chair? Just have a question, because 12 South is just one of many neighborhoods that has this kind of, I think of just off top, the 5 Points area, you get over to East Nashville, Germantown, where you tend to have a lot of bleeding between commercial and residential. And so I'm just kind of curious if there's any conversation going on between NDOT and council about amending RPP, because the current process now, you got to go through a signature process. It's kind of a street-by-street process, which lends itself to being pushed around. And I know it maybe sounds like regulatory reach, but has anyone considered that you would do sections of areas as RPP, and so there's overall consistent enforcement, and you're not pushing the problem from one to another? That happens in many. I just know when I've been to Boston, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, those places all have big swaths of RPP.
Yes. So there are opportunities in the future. We have had discussions with a few council members, but there will be more in the future as far as modernization as we go through with this new parking program. As we stand up, for example, the LPR systems that we're using for enforcement now. But there will be further discussion, correct?
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners? Do we have
I make a motion to approve.
It has been first and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have any nays? It is passed. Thank you.
Thank you. When will that take effect?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I stepped away, but one of the questions I meant to ask was when will that take effect? When will the signs start going on?
Staff, you mind answering that?
I can answer that. A technician will be out in the field within a week or so, and a work order will be generated and sent to the NDOT sign shop. Once you see some white paint on the ground, then you'll know that your sign is about 2 weeks away. The sign shop needs some time to locate underground utilities before they can install the posts, and they have to have time to fabricate the sign and come out to install it. So it'll be a couple of weeks.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to ask that question.
Item 6.2, authorization to extend residential permit parking from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, with 1 hour non-permit parking on the west side of 26th Avenue South between Ackland Avenue and Fairfax Avenue, requested by Councilmember Cash. Staff, would you please provide comment on this?
So this is an existing RPP area. This is a simple extension. The proposal for this 26th Avenue South meets the criteria 2, 4, and 8, which is 3 out of the 8, and we agree with this.
Yeah, and along with that, I'm Brandon with Laz and NDOT. Along with that, there is a school right across the street from this area, and you also have a lot of folks who attend Vanderbilt who kind of flood out and park into the neighborhood. So we were requesting approval for this to kind of help the neighbors in this area to give them ample on-street parking for their vehicles, being that they have students parking in their neighborhood as well as visitors of the school across the street.
Thank you. Council members, or anybody else in the audience would like to comment on this item?
Yeah, thanks. Usually when asked by people who are getting RPP, I discourage the 1 hour because I think it makes enforcement harder because they have to go by twice. However, this is across from a school. At some point, 26th Avenue got residential permit parking, and I missed when that happened, but there was a sliver near the end by two houses that were not included, and a year and a half ago, one of those two residents asked for it and was denied, and so I just kind of, if most of the street has it, I'd like those two properties to have the opportunity to extend it, but I do think the 1 hour, since it's across from a school, is wise.
Thank you. Commissioners, do y'all have any comments or questions related to this item? Councilmember?
One more thing. I can tell you, at the end of 26th, there are non-residents parking there all the time. There's money on the table there if enforcement is richer.
Thank you for that.
I make a motion to approve.
It's been motioned and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have any nays? It is passed. Thank you all. Item 6.3, notice to drivers about parking fines. Staff, would you like to comment on this first, please?
Yeah, surely. First and foremost, I just wanted to make a differentiation in that NDOT is responsible for enforcing right-of-way infractions. So anything that pertains to booting, which we currently do not do, that would be a private parking lot. And that would be something that I can't speak to in length at all, but I think one of the biggest issues that the parkers see is that they assume that by paying the booting fee, the ticket goes away. They still have to pay the fee for the parking itself and the booting fee and any other fines. I found that's one of the questions that comes up. And again, this is for the private parking lots. As far as the right-of-way parking infractions that we do, you can see a citation up there, and that outlines pretty much anything that has to do with the fine structure and the infractions that we enforce. You can see anything from a meter time expired to a fire lane violation to parking in the alley or parking in the opposite direction. These fees are outlined from $70 to $95. The highest ones being the fire lane, which is $94, and then the handicap, which is $95. Just for transparency purposes, it is to be noted that out of this fee, $26 is something that is technically NDOT, and then $44 is for the courts.
So this item was just on the agenda. I believe last month we asked for some information. First question I had, is any of this electronic, or are we only doing slips of paper on dashes or windows?
Do you mean enforcement-wise?
Enforcement.
It's paper still, until the LPR goes live.
Okay. Any other questions?
On meter time expired, do we not have a phone number, email address for those people from where they pay their meter that we could also send copies to, or is that not available? Just as a courtesy copy? Right, if we're paying
Can you repeat?
electronically on meters, is there not a way to also give electronic notice to people for that violation?
So you're
She's
saying,
thinking these
can
be
you,
electronic as well, the same way we're doing
well, the
meters.
citations at a later date will be all electronically. You're saying, since people are paying a meter, plugging in the license plate, phone number, et cetera, is there a way to us to communicate that they received a citation?
No, I thought he just said that it was still paper tickets.
Paper tickets currently, yes,
And
yes.
so, yeah, I'm saying like if you leave a paper ticket on somebody who has an expired meter, you also presumably have their electronic information because they have paid for that meter and it's expired. Is there a way to look at seeing whether or not we could provide a secondary copy electronically, either to the phone number they put in or the email address when they fill out there?
That's not something that that officer will be able to do out in the field. That would take a little bit more digging up. Yeah, that would take a little bit more back office work to do that.
So this parking violation is for,
This is parking
Alright.
on the street. This has nothing to do with garages and surface lots, which I think this 6.3 was kind of referring to. Codes would be the department that would regulate, the garages and surface lots, but our purview is strictly everything in the right of way and on the street.
so this violation is for the meters?
Correct. This is for meters, parking on the wrong side of the road, parking on the sidewalk. That's where you will receive an issue like this that would then go to the courts.
So to her point, if the meter expires, one of your enforcement staff is alerted and they go put one of these on the car and it's not electronic?
Currently, right now, they can look up the license plates through our system, through our handhelds. There's the different mobile apps that we use for enforcement. So they can look up to see if the license plate was ever even registered in there. If it is, it can tell you when it expired. It'll tell you if the vehicle has more time left, or if you look up the license plate and it doesn't show in there, that means the person didn't pay for parking at all.
So is the category that's all other offenses, is that, we just got through talking about RPP, is that if you are parking and you're not permitted, is the fine $94?
Yeah, you can select that. An officer would write a little notation of
Okay.
what all that other offense may be.
Okay.
We have a list of also other offenses on the back of the ticket book itself.
And I've got a question for legal counsel. What's the notification requirement by law for violation? I mean, people are talking about electronic, but it may be that the law is antiquated and still requires paper.
Yeah, so that's kind of correct, Commissioner. The two ways to provide like legal service would be like personal service, which in the case of parking tickets is usually via the windshield, or mailing it certified mail. However, I think the council member was maybe talking about like an additional courtesy copy being emailed, which it is possible to do it that way. There's a couple options there. You could either just do that as a courtesy copy if the back office cost of doing that is reasonable, or with the people who are actually signed up as customers of the on-street pay parking system, like they could, when they accept their terms and conditions, when they enter into that customer agreement, maybe agree to allow service on themselves by email, by the email address that they provide, in which case I think it would count as service that way.
And for a point of clarification, I think I understand the confusion there. So right now you're seeing the paper copy of the citations that are currently being issued. There will still be a paper issued, but it'll be printed electronically. So everything's be recorded into a handheld device that will have a Bluetooth printer, and it will print out the citation that will go on the windshield. We'll be moving away from the handwritten tickets in the future, for point of clarification.
I have one other question. What happens if people don't pay? I mean, I think some of the anecdotal stories that were going around when trying to implement the smart parking were that people just ignored stuff. They never had any consequences. They got fined. Everybody ignored it. So is there a way to ultimately collect, please?
Is there a way so in the future, there will be something we'll call a scofflaw list. So if those who have, 3 or more citations that haven't been paid for, they would hit a list. And then if their vehicles are then still parking on street, they can, and correct me if I'm wrong, legal, they can then get booted or towed, vehicle impounded for outstanding citations.
Yes, or if a warrant has been issued.
So Commissioner, when the ticket is issued, that is also sent to the courts as well at the same time. So then it becomes a matter of the citation in court, and if it goes further, no payment, then they would take action from there.
Are there contact information on how to pay on the back side of this somewhere? Or how do they know?
Oh, yeah, on the...
There's not a phone number, address, or anything.
There's a contact information for the TVB on the envelope, I want to say, for these citations. So they know where they can send their, and where they can pay their ticket online or send in a copy of a form of payment to the office.
Okay. And do you have a timeline or anything on when we think this will all be electronic? Or is that in the future? They're only paying electronically, right, to park?
Paying electronically, was that your question? Generally, yes, through the courts.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anticipated,
I would say within potentially the next 30 to 60 days, I would say that's a fair assessment to say.
Okay. I'd like to continue to have this conversation to me, if they're paying electronic, right? Everything else should be electronic, followed behind. I understand we're transitioning and rolling this out, but, consistency should be the goal.
For sure, and there's just a lot of development that goes into it, so a lot of hands in the pot, and obviously before it gets rolled out, we want to make sure it's rolled out correctly so that there's no errors in the future, and obviously this is a big undertaking in itself, so we're just making sure all of our ducks in a row with our department, JIS, the courts, because there's a lot of people involved.
There's a significant can of worms if you're talking about electronic ticketing. See that item at the bottom that says failure to answer this citation will result in the issuance of a warrant. Now imagine if you had electronic ticketing where you paid with the app, you went over, you were ticketed for being over time, but imagine if you go downtown with a carload of friends and one of them says, I got parking on this, I'll get this. Your friend pays to park and you think you've got 2 hours or you think you've got additional time. And the ticket goes to his phone, but not to the driver's phone. The driver may be unaware that his car, that his vehicle license number is the one ticketed. And if it doesn't get paid, then the warrant goes to the driver who may be unaware that there was a violation. So it's important that you get the service of the violation correct.
Yeah, I would just note this, we are just talking about a courtesy copy for people who are relying on electronic systems to pay. And so while those concerns would be valid for true service, I do think the public has been parking for free for their lifetime in Nashville. And so making sure that we communicate to them as fully as possible and figure out how to do that as fully as possible is going to be really important. Certainly we've all heard the horror stories when we started ticketing for noise downtown and people would find out 2 weeks later and they'd gotten a ticket every day in the meantime, right? That we really need to avoid. I guess the other question I have on enforcement is sort of back to this whole we haven't been doing this for anybody's lifetime in Nashville problem. On the tow companies, I know we've had a lot of issues with finding contractors who are willing to consistently tow cars that are having violations. Do we feel like we're set up currently today so that when we roll this out, we have third-party tow companies in place who are willing to, say, act on any warrants that are issued?
Yeah, there's ample record services around the city. They're all zoned. So depending on where you are in the city, dispatch will call that zone record service to attend to that violation.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And also I'm going to digress for a little bit. So each vehicle will also in the future receive a paper ticket on their dash. Along with that, there'll also be a QR code that they can scan to pay that ticket online as well.
Any other discussion? Great conversation and dialogue. again, love to continue the conversation again next month. We'll move on to item 6.4, 6.4, on-street metered space rental fee policy. Staff, would you like to provide comment?
Yeah, so part of our streamlining of the fees and the processes that we have with NDOT is multifold, but one of them was the on-street metered space rental fee. And we just wanted to establish something that would be easy to understand and make sense and have the math rooted in actual hours of operations so that we can actually understand where the fee comes from. So we came up with really simply just utilizing the current hourly rates that are established within the areas of downtown core and outside of downtown core, multiplied it by the amount of hours in the day, and just give a buffer of 65% occupancy, which would technically make it so that we would assume that the vehicle who would be renting a space would possibly not park overnight. But we just thought that the 65% buffer utilization rate would be something that is fair. So in that, as the CBD rate currently within downtown core is $2.25 an hour, multiplied by 24 hours in a day, by 65% utilization rate would make it a $35 fee. As far as the non-CBD, which is outside of downtown core, the current hourly rate is $175 an hour. So multiplied by 24 hours, it becomes $42. With the 65% flat utilization rate, it would become $28 per day per meter space. We just thought that this is a very cohesive and easy to understand formula, and this would apply to anybody who would want to rent space for the day. This usually applies to businesses. For example, if a hotel would have somebody stay with them, and let's say it's a group, they would have a concert. They might have some buses or equipment that would come with them. This helps that process to where we could rent out spaces, or they could rent out spaces in front of the hotels and park their buses safely. And that would be the calculation for it.
Commissioners, this also comes into play when you have construction. In construction permits, they are required to pay for the lost revenue on metered spaces. When those come into conflict with if they're closing a lane or closing a parking lane that has a metered space, they are required to pay for that lost revenue. This is actually set by this commission, this policy set, so that's why we're bringing this before you. The previous, I believe, was $21, and now we're going back and doing that and formalizing how it's calculated and bringing it before you as an update.
Commissioners, any questions? Go ahead.
I guess I understand the utility of a flat utilization rate, but can you just talk a little bit more about why we're going with 65%? I guess on some places, rate meters are always empty and some they're always full. And did we look at whether it made sense to use utilization rates that are different in the CBD versus non-CBD?
We looked at across the board what would make sense. I think actually 65% is kind of aggressive. If you would have, you can look at this through 24 hours in a day. Let's say 8 hours are not being, so it's 33%, right? So 33% is for 8 hours during the morning, then 33% is for the other 8 hours during the day, and the 33.3% is for the overnight. We just felt like 65% utilization rate is a good number that actually is it goes over beyond the 33%, which would be an 8 hour time frame within the day where the vehicles are not parking. So it actually is a little more than an 8 hour period during the day, and we thought that that's fair, whether it's overnight or any other time during the day.
But we didn't look at different areas of town and whether there are different utilization rates and maybe CBD, non-CBD, or different, we have different meter zones, for example. Do those zoned areas have different utilization rates?
So the rates for the entire area at CBD is the same and non-CBD is the same. As far as utilization, we looked at the occupancy as a base number, which is what I just mentioned. We haven't looked at it in a sense of the needs of one area would possibly be okay with 35, the other area would be good with 55. We just thought 65 is a good average for everybody.
I guess I'm concerned because it doesn't seem like we then really base this in any data if it just felt good. So I'm just trying to figure out how we arrived at this being the right number for everywhere.
You're talking about the 65% utilization rate that was decided. So I know in the process, there was some best practice review where you looked at how other cities actually established that utilization rate. That was taken into consideration, correct?
We looked at Atlanta and Austin, I believe. So Virginia as well.
I'd like to point out that 65% is just an estimation. I have put up a lot of pay parking signs, and just within the CBD, for example, the parking lanes on the north side of James Robertson are less than 50% occupied during the day. But if I go around the block and go down 3rd Avenue, those are 100% occupied. But if I go all the way down to 10th and Palmer, those are 0% occupied. And they're all within the CBD. So that 65% is just an amalgamation. It is a best estimate of the occupancy rate. If there's a bank of meters that may be 10 metered spaces there, the occupancy is going to be really, in most cases, less than 50%. If the meter location just has 2 or 3, yeah, those are going to be higher. But as an overall, yeah, 60% is a ballpark figure.
So the occupancy rate for 65% is based on what we feel that space area is occupied, but they get to rent it for 100% of that period, right?
That is correct. Yeah, so this is an approximation based on understanding how parking functions downtown in the different zones, but also looking at what other best practices were out there. We are collecting more and more data as we move along, so we will likely be back before you in the future with other options and other adjustments, but this is something that we have been in discussion with and looking at internally for quite some time. I will say, like I said earlier, we are getting better and better data as we go along with the program. We have now the smart meters where we have more information to base these on. Right now, we are still collecting that data. We don't have some of the data that we could use to come up with a better, if you're talking about an average per individual location through there. But we do feel like a flat rate is fair, a fair way to look at it, considering no parking spaces used 100% of the time. That's just not going to happen.
I think a flat rate is appropriate. I guess my thought or my interpretation of it, if we're renting it, then there's a 0% chance you're going to get the revenue, right? So does the occupancy rate, is that common to have an occupancy rate? Because for me, if you're renting something to somebody, there's a 0% chance you're going to have people parking there. So it should be equal, but I'll digress. It's my opinion.
So as we collect more data, we can come back here and revisit this issue.
That is absolute certainty.
Because what's the 1 year mark from when we'll have data from the parking program?
We just hit our 1 year mark actually last week. So we just hit it's February to January. Mm-hmm. Correct. Mm-hmm.
I just want to add something as well. We also have to consider that the people that are renting or these spaces also have to have their spaces reserved 24 hours in advance to their time starting. So we have to, that's actually part of the fraction as well. So
So the spaces are cleared.
yeah, so space is cleared, and one reason we do that is because we don't want to have to move anyone that parks into their time, so we have to allow them time in advance to let everyone else know, hey, there's a reservation here. So from now to then, you can't park here, and it's reserved from here to here. So we also, that has to be in the fraction as well.
There's an additional day that we're losing
Pretty
revenue
much.
Well, yeah, well,
on top of the days that.
we're not necessarily losing a day because the cones that are put out there, they're all dated. So you may see the cone in the space, but it'll say reserved from, the 15th to the 18th. We may put it out in 24 hours in advance, but the reservation starts on that actual start date that's posted on the sign.
So it's just letting whoever parks there know they gotta be gone by.
Correct.
Correct.
It's a notice system.
Sure.
So I will say one thing, slight correction. So technically, May is when we went live, so we are still collecting data. We won't have a full year under our belt until this coming May.
Are you looking for, do we need a motion to approve this? Are you
Yes.
looking for approval?
Yes, we're looking to update this from what our current rate is of the $21 rental a day. But we will come back later with more analysis as we move along and have that data to share.
When you say later, when do you think?
We hope to be back, May is when we'll have a full year of data.
Okay.
But we can probably promise to be back in the summer to have another discussion about the rate.
Before I'd like, to the councilwoman's point, different areas, potentially non-CBD and CBD, to understand that, and then understanding the formula or just the occupancy rate. How we got there would be critical.
Understand?
So, while there's no such thing as a perfect plan, this is an improvement over where we are, so I'd like to make a motion to approve this procedure, please.
You have a second?
A second.
It's been first and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It has passed. Oh, Ms. Costones, sorry.
I just wanted to make it clear that the policy that we are approving is not for the valets, it's for the other on-street occupancy.
That is correct.
For construction, which I think is pursuant to section 1320.020, the F of the Metropolitan Code, which says permit fees for parking meter occupancy, and that's the chapter of the code that deals with lane closures and obstructions and excavations. Permit fees for parking meter occupancy when an excavation or obstruction prevents the use of parking spaces regulated by meter. A parking meter occupancy fee shall be paid by the permittee in accordance with rates established by the Traffic and Parking Commission.
That is right. And it goes on to actually say, in certain cases, later on, like for nonprofits or for government entities, there is a possibility of a waiver for.
Waived for metro departments, federal, state, and local governments, and when safety so requires.
Yeah.
I don't see it for nonprofits, but.
Okay. Thank you.
This is the old bag meter program, is really.
That is correct. This is an update of the old bag meter rate.
Okay.
Ms. Costones, are we good to move on? Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you all for that dialogue and discussion. We'll move on to 7.0, unfinished business. 7.1, valet fee policy revision. Staff, you have the floor.
So this feeds into what we discussed previously. But there is a valley fee policy update also that uses the current rates that we just discussed. The valley policy update actually is a three-step process. First, we just wanted to update some of the verbiage in the policy itself, and also remove one of the configurations. So in December of 2023, this policy was revised to delete the configuration 3 from page 3 to modify the guidance determining lost revenue applicability on page 4. The new objective would be or the way the verbiage would be stated is that the valley parking program applicant shall be charged an application fee plus additional fees for the use of public right-of-way as set by the Traffic and Parking Commission. All fees shall be paid in advance to NDOT. The purpose of this verbiage and also the change in configuration is such that this creates an equal opportunity to be able to have the valley operators to be treated in a fairer ground, and this would make it so that, for example, there used to be cutouts that were a part of the right-of-way that would not be considered as something that we would lose revenue on, and therefore they would not apply they would not have a valley fee applied to them. So this evens out a field to where the use of right-of-way is actually something that accrues a fee. So therefore there's an adjustment for the configuration to be removed to allow for this change to happen. In addition to the configuration that was removed, we simply amended the list of the streets that were mentioned on the back of the policy. And the simple change is that as shown in attachment A, but not limited to these zones. Also, the point 3 states the proposed valet is located on a street that has at least one parking meter elsewhere on the street. A list of streets with meters is provided as attachment B, but not limited to these streets only.
Corby, could you go over to the next tab where it says 7.1B existing and scroll down to where you see configuration 3? This is the existing valet fee policy that was approved by the commission in July of 2021. I want you to see what configuration 3 is.
Yeah, page 3. It's over there. He's in the back. And basically what we're getting at with this, we want to ensure that that we apply the same formula for all uses of the right-of-way. With configuration 3, it stated that there was no lost revenue, which yes, may have been true, but we want to ensure that all right-of-way spaces can be accounted for and can be charged for. That's essentially what this kind of leads into. So with configuration 3, any operations that would have that, they would just pay that $50 annual fee. And with where we're looking to go, we want to be able to charge any use of the right-of-way, whereas we wouldn't be able to previously.
So just clarification, configuration 3 is what we're going to?
It's striking it.
Yeah, that
We're striking it.
Yes.
Correct. And along with that, it's like
And then configuration 4, it says non-applicable, we're striking that one too?
No,
Configuration 4?
configuration 4 stays only striking config 3. Along with that, there's another part that kind of plays along with it.
Configuration 3 looks like a valet stand in a pull-off where you don't see on-street parking.
Gotcha.
And along with this change, of course, we would have to look into changing the ordinance as well. And that is pursuant to section 124180C, in that valet parking permit applicants shall be charged an application fee plus additional fees for the use of the public right-of-way as set by the Traffic and Parking Commission. All fees shall be paid in advance. It currently states the fee for a valet parking permit shall be $50 plus revenue lost annually for each required metered space as measured by the hourly rate for each metered space. All fees are payable in advance. So along with the removal of configuration 3, the verbiage that states that it doesn't apply only to the list of streets listed on the valet policy, and the ordinance change are the 3 changes that we are looking to get approved today.
Yes, and that ordinance change will be going to council for the passing for the 3 readings as well. So I think it's mid-March, end of March, and then early April for those 3 readings.
Yeah, are we, Commissioners, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak or comment on this? Thought so. Welcome. I did. Please state your name for the record, if you don't mind.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa LeClaire, and I'm the president and CEO for the Greater Nashville Hospitality Association. Funny enough, I met all of you, I think, for the first time when we started talking about this back in 21, 22, 23. NDOT and the team here held a public meeting for us to ask some questions and get some clarification. And I think overall, what has been proposed is much more amenable to our business partners. I do have a question about this cutout. I'm still a little on Commerce Street has a cutout that they maintain that would be off the right-of-way. And so I'm confused yet now if they have to pay for parking there or not.
They do.
They do.
No, if it's a cutout is within the right-of-way, then they do have to pay. If it's outside of the right-of-way, they do not have to pay.
Okay, so within the right-of-way. And the reason, part of the reason I'm bringing up at
The right-of-way is broader than just the street.
okay, because there's the sidewalk and other access, I get it. A gentleman named Hayes, thank you, Michael Hayes, was at that particular meeting. And we had a conversation about whether, as he built his building or street with the cutout in it to help get the traffic off the street. And I know he had a question about how that was going to work. And I know he's not here today, and I can't speak for him, but I just want to make sure that we get that clarified so that those businesses understand that.
I think I can help a little bit, if I may. So if the area where the parking is available is within the public right-of-way, it does not matter whether it's straight street edge or a cutout, because that's available to NDOT to meter in either circumstance. So in either circumstance, there's a potential for lost revenue. Whereas, like, if it were fully on private property, this would not apply.
So as an example, maybe this will help myself clarify this, where the Four Seasons Hotel, for instance, built their porte cochere off the right-of-way, they would not pay. I think I got it.
Well, could you skim through a couple of the other, if the way that they put in the driveways takes up parking, then I think that might be an issue as well.
They built it within
Okay.
their property. So like hotels like, the Four Seasons, the JW Marriott,
Yeah, good.
the
Okay.
Westin, they all have their valet services on private property. Whereas, the Marriott Courtyard on 4th Avenue, Dream Hotel, those are all already in the lane, in the public right of way. So therefore, they would be paying the fees.
And that's configuration 4. You can see that on the screen.
Thank you for that clarification. That was most helpful. I know that was still a question we left the meeting the other day. I think that's the only comment that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
I'm sorry, there's still one part that we wanted to review.
Yeah,
today.
go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. So part of this Valley fee policy update is also changing the rates, which would, and again, we sat with the members of the Valley policy representatives, and the feedback was, 90% satisfactory to everybody, mostly because the fees would go down. The new calculation is representative of, this is the calculation currently on the screen is the old one. And as you can see, you need a master's degree to understand what's going on there. So we just attempted to make it much simpler and kind of go along with the previous space rental math and a formula. So that would make it so that this changes to a $50 application fee. Can we pull up the new formula, if you don't mind? I don't. Can you, 71D, is that not what it is?
Yeah, the revised copy.
I think it's 71D. Can you have a look at it? So I'm just going to guide you through it until we are able to show it. So simply put, there would be a $50 application fee, number of approved meter spaces for the Valley operation, and then based on the CBD and non-CBD hours per day, there would be a rate that would apply based on the hours of operation for each business. Coming off the CBD rate, that would be the aforementioned $35 for 24-hour day operation. But it would become $22 for an operation that operates between 8 and 16 hours a day, and then $11 for daily per metered area for anything below 8 hours and less. So 8 hours and less, technically. That would be within CBD. The non-CBD would be the same, except it would utilize the rate of 28, which is again the same as the rate that we discussed previously for the non-CBD metered spaces, and that would be anything above 16 hours would be the full rate of $28. Anything below 16 hours, between 16 and 8, would be $18, and anything between 0 and 8 hours would be $9 per day per meter for the operation. What this does is this creates a very transparent way of us understanding what the businesses or the hours that the businesses are utilizing for the Valley operation, which is very transparent, and they also pay for those exact hours. In addition, there is a flat 20% utilization rate for hotels and restaurants, understanding that the Valley curb, so to speak, is not really meant for storing of vehicles, so the turnaround is really fast. And we felt like 20% utilization rate is, as aggressive as it is, it's something that aligns with what we would want to present. And also, it was welcomed from the community of the Valley operators. Again, the prices, the annual permit fees will significantly decrease using this math as opposed to the previous years. Want to add something?
And I can add too for that 20% utilization, or what we call a driving rate. I would say pre-pandemic, a lot of the hotels, would see upwards of, 30-35% driving rate. And after the pandemic, we saw a significant decrease overall nationwide with people utilizing more ride shares and whatnot. So, and speaking with a lot of different operators in the market, we see that they're all pretty much right around that same ballpark. And you'll have to also factor in that not everyone drives, so a lot of people utilize Ubers to go to restaurants and go to hotels. So the operations are not parking as nearly as many vehicles as they were in the past.
One point that I wanted to make also is that this really helps the operators that have multiple locations, because along with the ordinance change that we'll bring in place, yes, the right-of-way that they might have had to cut out might accrue a fee this time around, but also the more operations they have, it's just really going to show on their invoices that they get every year, because the decreases are very significant. We see some of those that were paying around $50,000 last year. It's going to be near in the 20s. So some of the bills got cut in half or even more. We feel that this will encourage the Valley operators to operate more, and this should help the businesses to thrive as well by providing an easy and more affordable way to operate a Valley service in Nashville.
Just a couple initial questions. It would be really helpful if you're talking about going before council, the old fee examples don't match up with the new fee examples, and if we could get those to match up, it would certainly, I think, help people understand the changes a little bit better.
Yeah, sorry. So this page specifically only showcases the new rates. There is no old plus new comparison.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the old policy has examples of how it's calculated, and the new policy has examples, but the new policy examples aren't the same as the old policy examples, and so it's really hard to do a direct comparison.
You're talking about the particular valet zone that we're talking about. Yeah, I definitely see your point.
Okay.
Making sure that you're pairing apples to apples when you're looking back and forth at the calculations. That's something that can be done, yes, to make sure they're consistent.
Thank you. And then I guess I'm trying to understand, I know you said 20% utilization rate is aggressive, but they have it 24/7, and I don't know, I take the bus downtown now because I hate doing valet. I mean, one, it's super expensive, but two, those lines just back up and back up and back up, and they spill out over the street. So it feels like maybe they're 100% utilized to the average user. And so I think explaining why this is an aggressive rate might be helpful. For those of us who go downtown, we know it just feels kind of like they're constantly backed up.
So obviously there are peaks. There's times where, for example, for hotels, there's just times where everybody comes and it seems like it's in the same time because the check-ins are at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, depending on what they use, and it's the same with checkouts. But throughout the day and overnight, it's really not utilized that much. Speaking of hotel, valet, curbside, it's just not. When a vehicle would approach, they have 10 minutes to vacate the vehicle from the area, otherwise they would technically be cited. So the turnaround is really fast, and other than events or situations where something is going on, there shouldn't be really something that imposes the right of way. It's just, we really feel that 20% is something that is definitely up there it's a fair assessment from our end.
Okay, and I guess the thing too, I'm just sort of struggling with a little bit, is a lot of time went into setting these original rates, and it sounds like now we're cutting them pretty significantly for some groups. Why is that policy change being recommended by NDOT at this time, given the work done by the previous stakeholders?
This is based on feedback coming from the valley operators.
Was feedback sought though by all the folks who were a part of the original valet committee? Because it seems like if we just set, valet operators, great. I'm happy for them to be able to run their businesses, but I don't think they should dictate what we as a city think as a whole is best rate-wise, particularly when so much work was put into this by many people over many years.
Excuse me, but yes, we spent numerous meetings, T&P meetings, hashing out the old valet policy, so.
Yeah, we also looked at a bunch of other markets to make sure that our rates are kind of in line. So we looked at, I know, Atlanta, we did look at Chicago, we looked at,
Austin. Austin was much more expensive than we are. Atlanta was along where we are currently. We are competitive to other markets, other cities. Currently, based on the feedback that our director Diane Alarcon received from the valley operators, we just wanted to make sure that they're heard, and this is the result of it.
Yeah, I think they've been heard, but I think, so one, Atlanta has thriving public transportation we don't have. Austin's passed it, but it hasn't been implemented, right? And so maybe that says something about the value of the curb when you're a car-dependent city. I am very uncomfortable approving this much of a decline in the valet fee permit cost, given the work that colleagues and those who have come before put into this based just on the feedback of sort of internal investigations of other cities that may or may not mirror our city and our small rows downtown and our cluster downtown and all the issues we face and the work that's been put into this before. It seems like we need a lot more broader stakeholder discussions than we've had at this point.
Can we provide some clarification? And I believe it was a little bit before my time, but this initiated based on a specific reason that I don't recall but could you speak to that?
Yes.
'Cause I know there has been a lot of work, and there was a specific reason why we started to engage in these number changes. But
in late 2019, going into early 2020, we had a series of discussions about the curb and the revenue we were collecting from permits, meters, and valet. And it was clear that based on those discussions that many of the policies were, I'll just use the term, outdated, and trying to get a better, because I think the old policy for valet was $50 a year. Clearly, that didn't reflect the value of the curb in Nashville. So there was a long series of discussions, and a lot of this was negotiated during the COVID time, when it was difficult to meet, but a lot of time went into this by NDOT and other stakeholders. So I remember all the discussions, and, we hashed out a policy that got approved, after a lot of feedback, because some of the initial numbers were, my recollection, were high and, seemed higher than what we thought the market could bear, and we scaled it back. And so that's the history. So
just in summary, go ahead.
So yeah, to speak to that, if it's the commission's decision to not move forward at this time with the rate, there could be further discussions. The commission can direct us to do more homework on this and talk to additional stakeholders. I will say that there are portions of this that don't involve the rate that we would still like to move forward. the portions that have just been discussed to clarify what's in the policy.
So I guess this, to summarize, the old policy was flat $50 a year.
They varied
The 29.
The pre-2019,
Right.
pre-2020 policy.
So then we enacted a policy that seemed pretty high, or,
No.
Right.
The policy that got enacted was we went through iterations to
Right.
get to the agreed upon point.
right.
So I'd like to point out that removing item 3, or option 3 in there, that is now currently $50 a year annually. So removing that option does clears up the code, and it takes away that where they're only being charged $50 a year for that.
I just wanted to, I don't think there's a reduction in the old policy to the new, to your point.
Well, I think he said in some instances, under the new policy, the fee will be half as much as it was under the one that Commissioner Green, or then Chair Green, and other colleagues adopted in 2021.
Okay. Would you all like to clarify that, just to?
So that pertains to the new calculation, if approved. Outside of the calculation, the conflict removal and the ordinance and the verbiage would just make it so that there is a curb fee for the configuration that in the past was only a $50 per year.
So in your packet, you will see, I believe you will see the draft ordinance currently. If you can turn to that, and then, yeah. So what we're hearing from the commission is, at this point, there needs to be a little more study, a little more research on the valley, if it's needed to change or not. There's further discussion that the commission would direct NDOT to look at with regard to that. However, if we could take and move forward some of these other items in an ordinance, which we can bring back before you again if you would like, but we would like to clean up some of these existing things.
What are some of those things specifically? Ms. Costones, go ahead.
So in your packet, I think the very last page of it is a proposed draft ordinance that's up on the screen right now. It is up to you all to recommend that ordinance to council. Obviously, council has to pass it. But this board does have the authority to make recommendations to council. And it's a very simple change. Basically, we're just changing one paragraph of that section 1241 080. 080 for the ordinance? Yes, 080. And then the subsection C currently says, like what's currently in the code right now says, the fee for a valet parking permit shall be $50 plus revenue lost annually for each required metered space as measured by the hourly rate for each metered space. And that wording has just proved to be confusing for people. And maybe that's part of the reason why it was difficult for NDOT and the industry to reach agreement as to how to calculate that. So the ordinance change that we're recommending is simply to make it discretionary to you all to make this judgment call as to how this fee should be calculated. So that C will now be changed to say, valet parking permit applicants shall be charged an application fee plus additional fees for use of the public right-of-way as set by the Traffic and Parking Commission.
Yes, the Traffic and Parking Commission will still have authority on, as setting forth a new rate based on.
So that actually just gives you all more discretion, and your policy can be detailed and clear, whereas the previous language was sort of confusing. So that, I think, is a separate action that you all could take that I think is not controversial today, without getting into the policy that would be subject to that provision and the fee calculation in it.
Because it seems like it'd be helpful to get a sense of what's the revenue impact? That's what's hard to figure out. You know, I've just got examples, but I don't really know, what were the actual revenues collected in 2023? And what would be the revenue, how would it change in 2024? You know, just based on the same
Yes.
set of circumstances. I'll just make something up. You got 100 valet stands in multiple locations, you collect X. In 2024, we would collect Y.
We can provide that to the commission.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that the existing policy is based off of the old metered hours where Sunday was free and meters were not enforceable 24/7.
It was
Well,
8 to
now
4.
they are. And the current policy that's in effect right now assumes a 35% occupancy rate if there are 1 or 2 meters. It assumes a 50% occupancy rate if there are, for meters number 3 and number 4, and assumes a different occupancy rate if there are more than 4 meters. And that lends to the necessarily complicated formula for calculating that fee. The proposed new policy uses the hours of meter operation that are in effect now, that is 24 hours for the downtown CBD and the almost 24 hours for the midtown meters. But it also assumes a flat 20% utilization and doesn't assume an occupancy rate depending on the number of metered spaces that are there. That's part of the simplification. We think that overall, the sum total of valet invoices invoiced in 2023 are going to be pretty close to 24, but we can add another column to the spreadsheet, and we can present that to the commission if you like.
Yes, I think that'd be helpful. To me, some kind of a grid that basically shows current policy versus proposed with various things, because it is interesting to find out. Yeah, so the existing policy 2021 was done before we had a smart parking program and some of the other changes we made.
That is correct.
So getting this summarized would be, because right now it's difficult to know exactly what you want me to approve, what you would like for us to approve, I should say.
And to that point, from what I hear, the ordinance is something that if we can address would really be helpful and potentially have more feedback on the revised fee policy and the NDOT fee policy at a later date.
That is correct. That it clears up the code, and it also clears up the traffic and parking's responsibility.
So just referencing the recommendation here, you know, attachment E is something that you would like this commission to address, which just addresses subpart C of this ordinance. And then the other two, we could address at next
We could come back and share additional information on the calculations. We are, as we talked about when we were talking about the parking meters, we are collecting better and better data as we go along. So there are additional data points that we can come in and share with you with exactly what Mr. Smith mentioned as far as bringing you a table, showing you projections of revenue and giving you an idea of what this impact would be. We can certainly provide a more detailed conversation.
Okay, Ms. Costones, did you have one other point?
Going to say that the clean motion on the ordinance would just be to make a recommendation to council that it be approved.
Could you clarify, please, what exactly do we need a motion to do today if we're not interested in changing the whole policy, but the
Right,
what
right,
I'll
right,
say
right.
the bug in the
So
system
if you just
policy?
characterize your motion as you're saying that you are recommending the draft proposed ordinance in the packet for approval by the Metropolitan Council, that doesn't get into either of the policies or the fee calculations. That just gets into changing that language from the daily rate language to at the discretion of the Traffic and Parking Commission. So
Okay, my eyebrows are moving because I'm still trying to figure out what that motion says.
just to recommend approval of the ordinance, the proposed draft ordinance to amend 1241-080C so that it would now read valet parking permit applicants shall be charged an application fee plus additional fees for use of the public right-of-way as set by the Traffic and Parking Commission.
Yeah.
These are attachments. It's attachment E. It's the final 2 pages in your staff analysis report.
Sorry to be a little dense.
But if you don't take any action on the policies, then you won't have approved those by virtue of
It's a second.
recommending the ordinance.
I would request a deferment of those considerations and maybe request us additional information and to carry on the discussion at a later date, maybe if not next month, the month after.
Well, I think identifying that time frame is important, so.
Yes.
Next month or the month after, we would be at your discretion for that. I don't know that we have an opinion, but I would defer to the commission. I just want to make sure we said that.
Yep.
I just want to clarify. So we are moving potentially, should we so choose, to defer the adoption of policy for 1 to 2 months based on what y'all might recommend now that you could get the data together and then come back and re-present, and then to recommend that council adopt the proposed ordinance to amend section 12.41.080C.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, so, all right. Would it be okay if we made a motion to defer the policy? And I guess I'll do an indefinite deferral because that gives us flexibility, either 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, correct? Okay, so I'd make a motion to defer adoption of the policy indefinitely.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? That portion of this has been passed.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance, the recommended ordinance to be presented to the council.
It's been first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We have any opposed? It has been passed.
I would like to add that it's typical for the council member on the Traffic and Parking Commission to be one of the sponsors on this. So we'll be getting back with you, council member, to have that discussion.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for representing us.
Any other comments or discussion on item 7.2? Please, come forward. Just general comment. Please state your name.
Lisa LeClaire, President and CEO for the Greater Nashville Hospitality Association. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you all. You do a lot of work for our city, and it is greatly appreciated. And in listening to your comments about how we would lower this based on the fact that the businesses felt that that the fees assessed were overreaching. I wasn't as involved as I am in policy today when this all came together, but I can tell you that there was a lot of confusion for our businesses. And of course, this was all put together during COVID when most of our businesses were near or close to shut down. And I will tell you, to take the fees that they were seeing to go from $50 for a year to over $50,000 in at least one case I know, was as shocking as hearing taking the high fees now and asking for them to be reduced. So I just wanted to go on record to say that I certainly understand where we were coming from then. I don't think that our industry had really any understanding of what that formula was. The formula that was presented to us, I understand. And while I'm just a recovering general manager of a hotel, I do get it. I do understand. And I think our businesses also understand that use of the curb is valuable. And so the $50 fee doesn't make sense. There ought to be more fees involved. So just for your consideration, I have a colleague here in the valet parking business, and if we could for just a moment let him have an opportunity to speak. He was also involved in the meeting that they held to share this with us previously.
Thanks, Lisa.
Please state your name for the record.
Jake Varshall. I'm with Parking Management Company, PMC, based here in Nashville. We employ about 1,000 people here locally in the Nashville area. And I think as I was listening, and I would have signed up to speak earlier had I thought this wasn't a slam dunk. So education for me. But I think there were some misunderstandings I just wanted to clear up. There was an implication that because these costs were onerous for valet parking operators, that we spoke up and are opposed to it. And I just want everybody present to know that in few or maybe no cases do valet parking operators actually pay these fees. They are, in virtually all cases, paid on behalf of our partners. So Lisa, as a recovering hotel general manager, and our partners at event centers and restaurants and all the other verticals we service are paying these fees. And so the example that Lisa gave of $50 to $50,000 is not unique. The only times we as a valet parking operator are affected is when businesses close down as a result of these fees. And so, for example, the Palm Restaurant in downtown Nashville went from $100 a year to $65,000, and they just said, well, we can't have valet parking at $65,000 a year to monetize the curb space. And so they did away with it, and it affected their business. And you'd have to ask the Palm. I don't speak for them, but that's one of many examples where I think this had unintended consequences. Lisa spoke to another point that I think is worth consideration, which is that when this was built in 2020, I think there was a real misunderstanding about how these fees would play out. There were comments made about how you had to be a math PhD to understand, how much you were going to pay for to rent the curb space. And that was, our company had an employee advising in these fees. And I give him a hard time about it now because I just don't think anybody understood how they were going to play out. Never did we foresee fees of this magnitude. So anyway, I'll refrain from making further comments until we re-examine this again, but I wanted to dispel any notions and happy to answer any other questions as well.
Appreciate that comment. I think out of respect for the new people on this commission, that refreshed my memory, I guess, when we went back and were revisiting this valet policy. It went from $50 to a new formula that seemed to be a little outrageous. Then we dialed it back to compare it to some of our peer cities and others. So it wasn't that it was implemented and then we're decreasing it. It was continuing to work through what that policy meant and how that looked for both entities. So appreciate that context, and I think that refreshed our memory now to like where that was.
Very helpful to get because I remember going through all those iterations as chair and trying to find the right balance. And the problem was you were just, I guess our opinion here, when you're at $50 and you're going to go to something else, anything higher than 50 is high. And in some cases, it probably became extreme. So you're trying to we're not trying to maximize, we're trying to optimize the curb. So thank you for that. And I think that'd been more helpful in the presentation to get a little more context. So
especially for our new members who weren't here, because I understand how that can be confusing. But appreciate us working through that. And one other comment.
I was just going to say, give us an opportunity to bring it back before you on the agenda at a later date. You deferred it indefinitely, but we'll work with Chair Mason and have those discussions as we develop these agendas in the future.
Great. We'll move on to item 8, is there any new business to bring?
Do we need to defer
I'm sorry.
7.2? I think 7.
I'm sorry. I wrote my notes on 7.1 under 7.2, so my apologies. Thank you.
Belmont wants this deferred for another month.
Okay. So item 7.2,
I'll make a
need
motion to defer for 1 month.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? It has been passed and deferred for 1 month. Moving on to item number 8, are there any new business to bring up or discuss?
I received a letter from someone using 31st Avenue North because that's on the Vision Zero and it's being, I guess, repainted and marked. And I guess I'll just more make an observation. It seems like that process for that street started the first of the year, and here we are, the middle of February, and it's still not done. And I'm thinking it's very confusing to drivers about what's actually going on. Having used that street a lot, there's also, it seems like when we do these street redesigns, there's not any kind of, I'll say, notification on the street, new traffic pattern, be careful. But it just seems like it's drug out a little bit. And I don't know if that's creating resistance to the eventual pattern we want to create. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
So Commissioner Green, so we have actually moved forward with the restriping. It has been completed. During the before and after, we conducted a before and after study and found, I think at a maximum, there was 32 seconds of delay added to the system. Traffic was flowing. There are congestion periods, during the peak travel periods. We can share, come next time prepared and share with you the report where we can show the before and after study with you. There were some direct recommendations from the before and after study to address some storage length at some of the intersections, which we have already done, I believe so. But we can come back to you and share that report with you and the rest of the TMP to talk about that.
Oh, I was just going to say, I also got that correspondence. I've gotten, I don't know if it's the same one you got, but I've gotten correspondence on it being confusing because it took so long to restripe. And I know there's a balance between studying and striping, but 12 South, which I think we all love as a project, heard that same feedback a lot. It creates just a lot of confusion, and when people get confused, they get uncomfortable, and they then share that they don't like the design. So as we, and I've shared this, I know, with the third parties who've implemented some of these projects, making sure we're getting to final striping quickly, I think is really important for public buy-in to these projects, because otherwise it's just, where do we go? What do we do?
Definitely understand that. So when we, before we actually did a repaving, and before we were complete with the repaving, we had the temporary bikeway in place. We actually held numerous public meetings to bring people together to talk about it, talk about some of the analysis that we had done. But I do recognize making sure we're closing the loop with the community, and I think it would be appropriate for us to come before Traffic and Parking and share the study that we conducted, share the results of those. Some of those were previously shared with the community, but I think the more opportunity we have to do so, the better.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.